Jobber, you got this?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. So here's the situation, a messy room. I still go through this. All right, now, using instructions only, not helping the child, you're the parent, right? Just telling the child what to do. Have the child clean this up. Imagine this is a messy room, there's just toys.
I can't
So I can't use my voice or anything?
Yeah, talk to them, but just don't help them out.
Oh, okay.
Wait, I'm kind of confused.
You are 40 years old. Your dad is going to tell you to clean up your room, but imagine you're a toddler. You don't know what to do. Imagine you have never cleaned up a room before. This happened to me. The first time I had to make my 3-year-old clean up his bedroom by himself was right after I had given birth to my second child, and I couldn't move. I'd been so accustomed to doing it for him. He had no idea what to do. So just imagine that. You don't know how to clean up a room. He's going to tell you.
Okay. So then just go by his instructions.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Better do it right, because I'm angry.
Give him a good spanking, he'll learn real quick.
Didn't we have this debate in our
Yes, we
seminar?
did.
All right, son, as you can clearly tell, it's a complete mess in here. I'm extremely disappointed in you, more so than you. What I need you to do is pick up all your little toys and put them in your toy box. Can you do that for me, champ?
Sure. Where's the toy box?
It's right over here. You know how to open it, right?
No,
Because
can
you
you
got
open
the
it
toys
for me?
out.
We have to get a little bit more precise, Jeff. It has to be more organized than just one toy box.
All right.
Does that make sense?
All right, yeah, I
Instead
got
of
it.
just throwing everything, which doesn't really clean, it just moves the mess
So
somewhere
I
else.
want you to put all the dominoes together so they're all on their own, so you can play dominoes.
Okay, do it. Reyes,
So,
do
okay.
it.
Sure.
Should have wore pants today. I had a belt.
Hey, bro, you need a belt?
Don't you give him that.
Too bad Hope is not here. She would be outraged.
Yeah, she'd be pissed.
Still one left. All right, good job, son.
We need to finish that.
Get all your Legos and blocks and things like that. Pick them up and put them in your toy
Okay,
box.
when you said things like that, what did you mean?
Well, there's this right here.
Uh-huh.
This is like a
Legos?
conglomeration of Legos, but
Some-
not a singular Lego.
Yeah.
So I want them to get like everything that's grouped together.
Great, perfect. That's key. That insight that Jeff just gave us is key. He wants Reyes to get everything that's grouped together. Okay. Now, pretend for a moment, Reyes, that you're not 4 years old, but that you're an adult,
All right.
and tell me how you decided.
Pretend.
I'm sorry. You are an adult. Stop pretending you're 4 years old. And how did you know which objects to put in that pile?
Because I've seen Legos before in my life, so.
So how do you recognize what a Lego is?
There's also a Lego saying, like, it says Lego on Lego.
You can't read yet.
Go back.
But you just said he's an adult.
Well,
Yeah,
okay,
you said
you
sink
said
back,
being
in,
adult,
sink back
so-
into being a toddler. How would a
Okay.
toddler figure that out?
I mean, they're his toys. It's like, he knows the difference between a train and a block, you know what I mean? Like,
Can you describe that difference in detail? Can anyone help him out? Chris?
Name the character.
Chris?
The way I learned what a Lego was is pretty much the first time I stepped on one, I never forgot what a Lego was. And that's how I learned to make sure I picked them up, because I knew, hey, I don't want to do that.
well, they're
So I
Good.
avoided
Okay.
that by cleaning up my mess and getting it out of the way so I don't have to go through that again.
Good. Let's hear from Charity and then Jessica.
It's like the little holes that you can like build stuff with. Like you can get all different shapes and sizes and just build stuff. Because kids know like Legos, you get to build whatever you want.
So you recognize it by the holes and the
Yeah.
fact that those enable you to build things. Good. And one more thought?
Because I personally have a 5-year-old at home. He has the big like block set, and then he also has little Legos. So he kind of just knows it's just a smaller version of the big block. So if I say pick up your blocks, he'll go and pick up even the small Legos.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Jeff, keep him going and tell him what the next thing is.
Yeah, but I'm not done with my Legos, Jeff.
Okay. Dad.
It's Dad.
It's
All
Dad.
right, not calling him dad.
Hey, Omar.
Don't be afraid to speed it up, son.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Forgot my domino. Forgot another domino.
Come on now. I really wish I brought the belt.
All right.
Hey, use your boot.
All right, Legos are good.
Alright, son, that's good enough for now.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right.
No, not like that.
Oh, you said it's good enough, so.
It's good enough for now on the Legos.
Okay.
Get all your crayons, because I'm sick of you. Don't bite them and eat them when I tell you to grab them this time.
The red ones taste the best.
Tastes
like hot Cheetos.
Get your coloring utensils.
Excellent.
Don't eat them anymore. Gather them up and put them to the
I
side.
really bit the hell out of this one.
The red ones taste the best.
Where do you want these crayons?
Put them next to the dominoes.
Yeah, man.
Good job. Proud
Right there.
Is there another way to tell the difference between crayons and blocks?
Yeah, I mean, you color with one.
You can color with the crayons, that's one difference. Is there another difference?
You can't eat a block.
Yeah,
You can't eat a
Good
block.
shape.
You can't construct with crayons
Great.
unless you're drawing something.
What you create with crayons is different from what you can create with blocks.
Great points.
I was gonna say that you can
Alright,
also.
so that's enough time.
Okay.
Get all the action figures and army guys.
Yes.
Put those to the side.
No,
How do I know what's an action figure?
Good critical thinking question.
Way to show you got a brain. See this? Yeah, it's got an action when you use it. Pick those up.
You say
And I want you to put those in the toy box this time.
Is this an action figure?
No. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an army guy. I said army guys.
He ain't got no
Super
legs.
I
slick.
think you guys have illustrated, you guys have provided an illustration of Aristotle's main method of thought and some of his key ideas. So you don't have to finish that. Let's give them a round of applause, guys. Thank you. Okay. Aristotle was very interested in the question of how human beings think, how human beings learn and know, and then in applying that in his own scientific investigations. So this process that Jeff and Reyes just went through, in Aristotle's language, is abstraction. It literally means drawing out. So you take a mess and you draw out of that mess categories of things. So it's the way the mind takes a mess of information that we get from our sense experience and creates categories. So we could say the mess of sense experience. Categories are groups of things that somehow belong together. And Aristotle was very interested in understanding this mental process and in using it. So think about how we learn and know. For Aristotle, the only source of knowledge is the senses, which are what? What are the senses?
See, touch, taste, hear,
Smell.
smell. Yeah.
The senses are like doorways into the mind. And information or data are constantly pouring into your senses through those gateways. It is a disorganized mess, like vomit or diarrhea or a child's messy room, right? So your brain organizes that information into categories which you create. And this is an active process. So Aristotle saw the fundamental means of human knowing as being abstraction from sense experience. So the mind creates these categories to put the information into. And that is how we learn and know. And some of those categories or ways of thinking you've already illustrated. You're like 10 slides ahead in my lecture, but I want to talk about this now. In the ways of distinguishing these objects, some of you talked about shape. That's kind of what Aristotle would call the final cause, or formal cause. Form or formal cause. The shape of something that makes it what it is. So these have holes, as Charity pointed out, and that's what gives them their shape. But you can also distinguish things by what they're for. Crayons are for coloring. Lego blocks are for building. Aristotle would call that the final cause, or telos in Greek. These are words that are important to know. I'm sorry. You'll see them as you do the reading. So that the final cause is the purpose of something. So everything has a shape that makes it what it is. If you're human, you have a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs generally. But everything also has a purpose or a final cause, what it's for. We could also talk about the material cause. What are these things made of? Plastic, wax. What about the train tracks?
Wood.
Wood. So that would be material cause. What things are made of. The fourth kind of cause is what scientists today think of as real causality, namely the efficient cause, what creates the thing or brings it into being. So the efficient cause of a Lego could be a 3D printer or the factory that makes it. The efficient cause of a wooden train track would have to be somebody carving it. So you could think about another way to organize these things is, where did it come from? What brought it into being? And that would be the efficient cause. We'll come back to that in the lecture, but I think it's fantastic that you've actually already started talking about those categories. So just hold this idea in mind, abstraction. And this is part of a discipline that we call epistemology. Know this term, it's one of those philosophy buzzwords that I wouldn't be doing my job if we didn't talk about it. How human beings learn and know. How do you know anything? How can you be certain of anything? That's epistemology. So that the human mind takes this mess of sense experience and abstracts categories from it. Okay, thank you to our volunteers. Okay. Aristotle, I like to call him the observer. He was the founder of an approach to philosophy that starts from observation and sense experience prior to abstract thinking. Aristotle was in the line of great naturalists, which included Charles Darwin and George Washington Carver, people who simply loved to observe the natural and human worlds and understand them. And many of them were great artists as well. They would draw what they saw. In better days, we'd go outside and I'd have you draw something outdoors. That's another way to understand Aristotle's approach to learning. So I like to use George Washington Carver as a kind of modern-day Aristotle. Okay. Aristotle was from a country that today is called Macedonia. It is just north of Greece, and Macedonians are very emphatic that they are not Greek. And in fact, there was some conflict between Greece and Macedonia that later got Aristotle kicked out of Greece because of his association with that kingdom. You do not have to memorize his date of birth, I have not. But just be aware that he was born around the time that Socrates died, 399. So their lives kind of are slightly connected chronologically. His father, Nicomedes, was a doctor and served as the personal physician to King Philip of Macedonia. Philip was a conqueror who started what has been called the Hellenistic Empire. So Aristotle was connected to that royal family, and because of that, he was given all of the advantages of a good education. He was sent to Athens at the age of a typical freshman undergraduate, to study at Plato's academy. So Plato learned from Socrates, Aristotle learned from Plato. So we see a sort of connected inheritance or passing on of ideas here. But Aristotle ended up disagreeing with his teacher Plato on some fundamental things. He attended Plato's lectures for 20 years. Plato, again, as you know, was the author of the dialogues about Socrates. Aristotle, as an adult, became the tutor of Alexander the Great, who you may know was a conqueror who spread Greek culture around Asia Minor, even perhaps all the way to India. So Aristotle was his tutor, can be connected with that political figure. He went back to Athens to found his own school, where the students were called peripatetics because they would walk around while they were talking. Plato founded a school called the Academy. Aristotle founded a school called, I think, the Lyceum. So his students took notes from his lectures, or wrote down their recollections of the lectures after they were finished. That is why, in this reading, Group 1, you may already have noticed that it might at times seem kind of repetitive, and maybe even a little disjointed. Because what you're getting is not a connected literary composition like the dialogue Crito. You're getting notes from students. So it might feel a little repetitive, and in places it might feel a little bit disconnected. Just kind of be aware that that's what you're getting. Aristotle and Plato could be seen as a classic contrast in philosophy. In a way, these two people represent two points of view that have been in conflict with each other for 2,000 years. You can still see these 2 points of view today. This is a detail from a fresco in the Vatican called The School of Athens by Raphael, a Renaissance painter, with Plato, the old man, and Aristotle, the younger man, at the center of the painting. So Plato, like Socrates, is pointing upward, emphasizing that ideas are important. Ideas, such as moral principles, are important and real. Aristotle is gesturing downward and outward, emphasizing that the things we can perceive through our senses are real. So which is it? Ideas or things you can perceive with the senses? And you can sort of start to think for yourself, what do you think? Are you more of an Aristotelian or more of a Platonist?
Do they ever conflict?
Yes, they absolutely. Well, in his writings, Aristotle expresses disagreement with Plato. Whether they argued in the classroom, I don't know. But in his writings, you'll see that he's critical in places of Plato's philosophy. We might bump into that in our seminar reading. For Plato and Socrates, knowledge is within. A priori means you're born with knowledge of the truth. But for Aristotle, knowledge begins with sense experience. When a child is born, that person's mind is a tabula rasa, or blank slate. They don't know anything. You learn by perceiving things with the senses, taking it in, and then your mind creates knowledge out of that. So it was the opposite of Plato. Socrates, remember, thought that knowledge was within, therefore teaching is a process of questioning that brings the knowledge out of people. Aristotle was more like a really hardcore coach. It has to be beaten into you. So it's two different ways of thinking about learning and thinking about teaching. For Socrates and Plato, the soul has its own non-physical reality. Your soul that each of you possesses is eternal. It has always existed. It has gone through multiple births or reincarnation, and it is separable from the body. The body is not part of who you are. It's like a paper bag that gets thrown away when you're done with it. For Aristotle, the body is much more important. And the soul is so closely connected that it's almost like the shape of the body. Just as I don't know what you'd call it, a rectangle, or not a cube, but something like a cube is the shape of this block. So your soul is the shape of your body. They're that closely connected. So when the body is destroyed, how can the soul exist without it?
Could you?
Go ahead, ask.
Can you explain it? Like, I'm not really understanding what you're saying. Like your soul.
Think
is
about
part
it
of,
neurologically.
you inside you, or like.
Right, so For Plato, the body is like a vessel or a container, like a glass. And your soul is what's inside of it. The soul can be taken out and go to an afterlife. The body dies, but the soul is still who you are. It stays the same. You might be reborn into another body as another person, right? You might be female, you might be Chinese, but it's still you because your soul is just being put into another body. So the soul is who you are. Whereas for Aristotle, the body is part of who you are. So you kind of have to decide what you think. What do you think the soul is? Do you think there is one? Do you think it can be separated from the body? So the implication of Aristotle's thought is that when this body decomposes, there is no soul. If I were to melt this down, throw it in a fire or melt it down, it wouldn't be a block anymore. The block's gone because the formal cause, the shape, is gone. So that's what Aristotle thought about the soul. He also thought that all living things have souls, just different kinds of souls. So they disagreed on knowledge and they disagreed on what we call metaphysics. Metaphysics is the question, what is really real? Or even, I think, as Nathan was asking in your reading session, what is good? What is the good? That is a metaphysical question. Do you guys feel the need for a break? We have half an hour left and I have a lot to cover. Do you want to take a break now or do you want to get out 5 minutes early?
Get off my nerves.
Push through.
I think let's do that. I hate to make you sit. We have to get going. All right, Aristotle was interested in everything. He mapped out many scientific ideas as we know them today, fields of the sciences, and he was a systematic thinker. As you remember, our Mediterranean philosophers were also observers. They observed and inferred. Aristotle was more systematic. He wanted to map out a complete understanding of each field of study, from biology to zoology to ethics, which is what we're reading about, to political science, even to music and literature. So he investigated many different fields of study, meteorology, astronomy, and wrote about them. We do not have all of his books, but we have many of them. Many of them were preserved by medieval Islamic translators and then brought back to the West. Aristotle was also, and here I want you guys to do a journal entry if you've got your journals out. He was the first to systematize the study of logic. Logic, which comes from that Greek word logos, which means reason or word, is a way of analyzing how we think. So when you want to argue for a point and convince someone else that you're right, you use logic. If you want to defeat someone else's claim, then you can find the flaws or fallacies in their logic. One way of understanding logic is to see it in terms of syllogisms. A syllogism is a series of 3 statements. If you accept the first 2 statements, you have to accept the third. They're linked together in a kind of train or chain of reasoning. So here's just an example. All football players wear helmets. The Bears are football players. Therefore, what? The Bears wear helmets. So if you accept these 2 statements, these are called premises. Premises or starting points of your argument. You have to accept the third. We can make up something different. All baseball players can throw. Okay, give me something that is.
All baseball players.
All track runners can run.
All track runners can run. Where's my track runner? Addison?
You can throw.
I can run track, you can't run.
I mean, someone throw.
Well, how about this? Let me try this. This is another way of thinking about this. Listen, guys.
All players can dribble. There we go.
Well, listen to this. Think about this. All baseball players can throw. Gabe's a baseball player, therefore Gabe can throw. Now, you flip it around. This is called the contrapositive. If you cannot throw, you're not really a baseball player. If you deny,
You made designated hitter.
if you deny the conclusion, you have to deny one of the premises. So if all baseball players can throw, and Gabe is a baseball player, the conclusion is Gabe must be able to throw. But if he can't throw, guess what? He's not really a baseball player, right? It's me, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to single you out. Just as an example, you do that with any sport, right? So write your own syllogism. Make up something completely different. Don't make it like this one. It can be about sports, but make it different. Write your own syllogism. 2 premises and a conclusion which has to follow from the premises. And then let's just hear a couple of examples. So do this in your journal. Or in your notes. If you don't have your journal book in front of you, that's okay. Trevor, is that still running?
Yeah.
Good. I'll just put it up on the chair there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't. Just make up your own. Examples?
All teachers have a degree. Miss Chris is a teacher. Miss Chris has a degree.
Okay, good. I better have a degree. And if I don't, I should get fired, right? Great. Other examples?
Okay, so like, I said all preachers are certified to perform like weddings and funerals, and Kevin is a preacher, so Kevin can do weddings and funerals.
Absolutely. Good. Jeff?
But all adults have a license. I'm an adult, so I have a license.
All adults have a license. Okay. Is that true? All adults have a license?
No.
So,
Every
now,
adult I know.
you can question the premises. If you accept them, his conclusion has to be true. If you accept that all adults have a license, then you have to accept his conclusion that he has a license. One way of uncovering faulty logic is to question people's premises. Another example might be in terms of moral reasoning. If you're doing moral reasoning, one of your premises might be a principle. All parents should take responsibility for raising their children. That's a moral principle. Socrates is a parent. Therefore, Socrates should take responsibility for raising his children. That was Crito's one actual logical argument. Or, let's see, I'm trying to think about, you raised a really good moral dilemma in your journal entry, Andrew. I wish we had more time to talk about it. But what would be a principle that could help a student decide whether to transfer or not? All athletes, hang on, all athletes should be happy in their sport. Joe is not happy in his sport. I mean, I think we'd have to make it a more complicated syllogism, but we could get one out of that. Try writing it. You might need 3 or 4 steps. But moral reasoning can take this form. And if you're thinking like Socrates or even Aristotle, you start with a principle, a value that you believe in. And then you reason from that value to see what you should do in a specific situation. This we already kind of talked about, so I'm not going to beat it to death. But the 4 causes of being, Aristotle analyzed, and we still use these categories. For Aristotle, the good is the ultimate final cause. Why are you here today? To get a grade. Why do you want a grade? To pass the class. Why do you want to pass the class? To get a degree. Why do you want to get a degree?
Good job.
To get a good job. Why do you want to get a good job? Why do you want money?
To survive.
To survive. So is survival the ultimate goal?
Yes.
Then survival would be the good. That's one way of thinking about it. So the final cause or telos, what is it for? That comes into play in the ethics. So again, Aristotle thought of the soul as something that every living thing possesses, and that it's the form of the body. So a very different concept from Plato and Socrates, just something to be aware of. People have souls. Animals have souls. Even plants have a soul, but it's not a rational soul. It's just a living soul. It makes them live. Rocks maybe not, but all living things have soul of some sort.
It's not boulder, it's a rock.
Aristotle also gave us the system of species classification, which we still use, and which you probably memorized in 8th grade. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So biologists and zoologists today can organize, can fit every single living thing that exists into those categories. It goes back to this. Aristotle studied living things. These might be different species, right? But, well, here, Legos and Duplos might be different species, but they belong to the same genus, blocks. So he was interested in observing and classifying. This is crucial because you're going to see him do that in ethics with friendship. He observes the ways people relate to each other, and then he tries to classify them. Group 1, how many categories did he come up with? Do you remember from the reading? Look for that when you go back to it. How many, according to Aristotle, how many kinds or species of friendship are there?
3.
Good. 3 kinds of friendship. Do you remember what they are? We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it in seminar. That'll be one question we definitely want to talk about.
We actually talked about that. I put business, friendship, and like pleasure.
Good. So that would be one way of dividing it. See what Aristotle says and see whether you agree or disagree with him. And it offers a wonderful way to think about your various relationships and see what categories they fit into. Some might be in 2 categories, and then that creates a conflict of interest. So it's a wonderful way to think about relationships. So Aristotle is doing this with friendship. Aristotle also inferred with most ancient astronomers that the Earth is at the center of the solar system. Today we don't think that. Modern view is not that, but in the ancient and medieval worlds, this is what people thought. The Earth is here, the moon, the sun, and the 5 visible planets go around it. And they have these little epicycles in here because they speed up and slow down. This is the picture of the universe that all ancient people and medieval people were working with. It still works. Navigators, sailors today still use this system. It was invented by a geometer named Ptolemy to figure out where they are on the ocean. So the system still works. But just be aware this was the ancient picture of the universe. And Aristotle thought that there was some metaphysical entity outside of the whole thing that continually makes it go. He called that the prime mover, the source or original efficient cause of all motion. Again, this is important just to be aware of. Much of Aristotle's scientific work was preserved by Muslim, Arab translators and philosophers through the Middle Ages, when the West was falling apart, and then brought back into the West and influenced our thinking. We're going to wrap up with this is maybe the last 3 slides, a discussion of our topic, ethics. Ethics and morality essentially mean the same thing. Morality is more general. Ethics tends to be more specific. So we have business ethics, medical ethics, administrative ethics, etc. But Aristotle is just using the term ethike, ethics, to refer to how we make moral decisions. So this whole book really is kind of the science of happiness. How do we make choices? And to find the good or happiness in our lives. I love this picture one of my past students found. A guy passed out after obviously drinking too much, solo cups everywhere. That's not happiness for Aristotle. Happiness is moral goodness. And he paints a picture of that with his concept of virtue, and that'll tie back to the journal entries that we did. Virtue, the term virtue, for Aristotle, means a quality or characteristic that makes us good. I think it was Alex who asked me, you're talking about quality or characteristic. Same thing for Aristotle. It's a quality that you have inside of you that makes you good. The Greek word for virtue is arete. It simply means excellence. So you might know what it means to be good at your sport or something else you do. Are you a good basketball player? Are you a good bowler? Bowling people. Yes or no? And you know what that means? Aristotle is asking us to think of moral virtue in the same way. It's a quality that you have in yourself that makes you good at doing something. So let's take a look at what you came up with. virtues would be the qualities that make us good. Vices would be the qualities that make us bad. Which is the good side? Where I'm standing? So this is virtues. What you guys came up with here are virtues. So hold this word in mind. It's one of the key words of philosophy we want to keep using. Just become aware of what your virtues are. Gain a handful of key words, maybe 3 or 4 key terms that constitute for you your most important virtues, and be able to talk about them. Okay, vices would be the opposite. V-I-C-E-S. So just be aware of that word. Vices are bad qualities, qualities that would make you a bad person. Now, how do you know the difference? Who gets to say what's good and what's bad? Aristotle would say, society tells us. Society defines what are virtues and what are vices. Plato would say now, the eternal law, eternal moral principles define what's good and bad. But Aristotle's just looking around at his society and saying, what do people praise? What do people blame? So, virtues, what do we have here? Self-awareness, the quality of being upbeat. Who put that? How would you turn it into a noun? Okay, yeah, so maybe we would turn it into the noun. Positivity. That's good. Okay. Positivity, self-awareness, consideration, perhaps? Does this mean like being respectful toward people?
Self-aware. Well, I thought of self-awareness as in.
Well, the consideration. Did you do
Oh
consideration?
no. I thought you
The
meant
self-awareness
yeah.
is very good. In fact, in a way, guys, self-awareness is the fundamental virtue. You can't grow as a person unless you're paying attention to who you are. But what's consideration?
Understanding of others.
Okay, so the capacity to...
Take in people's input versus just solely relying on your own.
Like think of how people will react to certain situations.
Interesting. So it's a sort of